Okay, so here is going to be in two parts. One is going to be percents, decimals, and fractions. That's the first thing that we're going to address. So the first three problems are going to be, how do I make a percent a decimal? Okay, so if I have 83% and I want to make this thing a decimal, I think of it in one way as far as on if I'm going to go from percent to a decimal. Again, I like to think of it as alphabetical, and I know that there's a glare going through there, but a percent to a decimal, I like to think of it as an alphabetical order. Notice this is in reverse, so instead of going left to right while you're reading, this is in reverse because the letters are reversed. So I go from right to left. So I move my decimal, and it's always going to be two place values. So you're going to move the decimal two place values. And if you're going from percent to a decimal, you're moving that thing from the right to the left. So first thing, you have to know where the decimal is. Well, it's 83%. If there's no decimal, it follows the last number. If there's no decimal, it follows the last number. Now move it two times to the left. 12.83, and you drop the percent. Okay? So if I gave you 500%, first, locate the decimal. It's not there, so it follows the last number. Move it two places, always going to be two places, from the right to the left. 1, 2. The answer is 5. Now, you could write 5.0 if you so desire, but again, drop the percent. And then the last one is, say I gave you 0, well, I'll erase this, 0.6%. Now this is where it gets a little weird, right? Because now I'm going to go from this decimal here, and again, you're going to go to the left, 2. So I'm going to go 1, 2, and put a decimal. Notice there's no number there. Something's missing. Anytime something is missing, fill it in with a 0. 0.006. Okay? That's how you go from a percent to a decimal. What if you're going the opposite way? So now, what if I'm going from a decimal to a percent? Well, now that is actually in alphabetical order. So now I read it like a book, left to right. I'm going to move two place values. Going from left to right. So I'm going to move two place values to the right. Okay? So now, what if I gave you 0.056? So you move it twice. You've located the decimal. It's right here. You move it two places to the right. 1, 2. Put the decimal. Drop the zeros off. They're gone. 5.6. And don't forget what you're after. You're after the percent. So put a percent symbol in there. Okay. What if I gave you 6.1? Locate the decimal. Move this decimal 2 to the right. 1, 2. Notice there's something missing there. So fill it in with a 0. 610%. And don't be fooled by saying, boy, that's a big percent. That's okay. That's okay. Just follow the rules, moving that place value, that decimal, 2 to the right. Okay. Next one, and the final one of this, which, what if I gave you 0.35? 0.35. Again, locate the decimal, move it 2 to the right. 1, 2, 35, and don't forget to put the percent sign down. Okay, so two skills. Going from a percent to a decimal, move it to the left. From a decimal to a percent, move it to the right. And it's always going to be two place values. Okay? So now, let's put fractions into this game here a little bit. So, what if I say, I want to take this percent, and my percent is 120%. and I want to make that into a fraction. Here's what I would suggest. Go in stages, okay? Take this percent, put it into a decimal, but you already know that because that's a skill that you just learned. So I go from here, I locate the decimal point, I move it 2 to the left, 1.2. Now, how do you say that out loud in mathematical land, which is 1 2/10. Don't worry about the 1, so now it's a mixed fraction, 1 2/10. Well, now you have a fraction. It's not simplified, though. Don't look at the 1, look at the 2/10. They're both even numbers. Divide each one of those things by 2. I have 1 1/5. There's my mixed number, okay? Let's do another one of those. What if I gave you 38.5? What is that? 38.5%. Again, change it to a decimal. If you have a percent, change it to a decimal, change it to a fraction. Go in that order. I think it's the easiest way. Can you do it the other way? Sure, you can do it other ways. So I'm going to move it to 12.385 and drop the percent. That's 385 thousandths. Notice I have 3 decimal places there, thousandths with a TH. So 385, exactly how you said it, over 1,000. Okay, now, what number goes into each one of those? Well, if it ends in a 5 or a 0, 5 goes into it. That's a rule, 5 goes into it. So divide each one of these by 5. So the top, if I divide 385 by 5, I get 77, and on the bottom I get 200. And that's my simplest form fraction, okay? Do one last one of those. So what if I gave you 0.2%? Rule. That's not a rule. It's a recommendation. How about that? Change it to a decimal. Well, move it 2 to our left, 1, 2. There's nothing there. Put a 0. So this is 0.002 or 2 thousandths. So 2,000. So I put 2 over 1,000. Well, now they're both even numbers, so divide it by 2. 1 over 500. Okay? Those are how you go from a percent to a decimal. Okay? Next. Say I want to go from a fraction to a percent. This is what I do. So say I started with a mixed number, 1 3/4. Do not pay any attention to the 1 right now. All you want to do is pay attention to the 3/4 and put that into a calculator. Here's the calculator skill. Put it in 3 divided by 4. Those are the buttons that you would press. 3 divided by 4, and then obviously execute or equals. And that's going to give you 0.75. Okay, now I have this thing as a decimal, but I want to make it a percent. How do I make it a percent? Well, again, I take this decimal and I move it from a decimal to a percent, move it to the right. 1 to 175%. Okay, so now let's try another one. Let's go with 3/8. Now, say you didn't have a calculator, and you didn't know how to put it into a decimal, but you still have to do a decimal, so you do long division. How do you do long division? This is different from the calculator. So you take the denominator and you divide it into the numerator, and I would put 2 zeros, 0.00. Put them up on the line. Now, you may have to add another 0 in there, but we'll see. We'll see how evenly it comes out. 8 goes into 30 3 times. That's 24. Subtract 6, bring down the 0. Now 8 goes into 67 times, which is 56. Subtract. That's a 4. Now if I add a 0 there, now 8 goes into 40 evenly 5 times, which is 40, and now I have a remainder of 0. Well, that's good. So now I have my decimal, 0.375. Change it into a percent. The rule, you can go from a fraction to a decimal to a percent. That's what I would suggest doing. From a percent to a decimal. That's what I would suggest. And then you could go to a fraction after that. So move this thing 2 to the right, 37.5, and don't forget to put the percent sign down. Okay? All right. The last thing of this assessment is this: what if I have to put things down in mathese or mathematical language? So I have this. What number is 42% of 80? What number is 42% of 80? When you have the what, that you always fill it in with the x. What number? Well, that's my x. Is equals 42%. Anytime that you have a percent in a problem, in a sentence like this, change it to a decimal, change that thing to a decimal. So move it twice, it's 0.42. Of means multiply, 80. Okay? Now this is easy because now I just have to multiply these two things together. Again, if I didn't have a calculator, I'm going to do it the long multiplication way. So I have 80 times 42. I'm not really going to worry about the decimal. Remember, long, if I'm multiplying decimals, put the decimal in at the very end. So I have 0, 16, 0, 32, 0, 6, adding down the columns, 3, 3. So now I add up how many decimals there are in my original problem. Well, there's 2 here, none here. So I move it over twice, 33.6. And that's my number. Okay? Key to this, make sure that you change this, the percent, to a decimal. Okay? Let's do another one. 0.6% of what number is 7.5? Now, like I said, get rid of this percent, move it twice, 1, 2, oops, there's nothing there, fill it in with a 0, 0.006 of means multiply, x equals 7.5. That's the is 7.5. How do you solve an algebra problem like this? Remember, you got to isolate the letter, isolate the variable by moving everything away from it, by performing opposite operations. So this says times, so I divide. Each side by 0.006, 0.006. Well, these cancel out. X is equal to, now I have this. Ooh, I'm going to do the long division for you, just in case you do not have that calculator. So the bottom, let's go up here. The bottom divides into the top. You cannot have a decimal on the outside of that division sign. You can't have this. So you got to move it to make it a whole number. I'm going to move it 1, 2, 3 to get that 6. But whatever you do on the outside, you have to do on the inside. 1, 2, 3. Oops, there's no zeros there, so add some zeros. So 6 now divides into 7,500. Now I'm going to erase this up top so it doesn't get confusing up there. Again, make sure that your outside is a whole number. So now I just do this division. Well, 6 goes into 7 once, that's 6. Subtract 1, bring down the 5. Well, this is 2, and this is 12, subtract, and this is 3, and now bring down the 0. Well, 6 goes into 35 times. Well, now that's 30. Great. But now I've still got another 0 here. Just fill that in with a 0. Okay? Just fill that in with a 0. So the answer is 1,250. Okay, I will be back with part 2 of finding the perimeter and the area for you.